Olá a todos! Hoje eu estou aqui com a Carol Davis e eu gostaria muito de apresentá-la para vocês, já que no dia 1º de maio ela vai dar uma palestra e uma aula para todos vocês. Hi Carol, welcome to Brazil.
Thank you, Anna. Nice to be here.
Thank you. So I think we should start having you presenting yourself. Tell us a little bit about your background, please.
Okay. I'm a physical therapist. I graduated a long time ago, but I began practicing in 1969, and I was at the Mass General in Boston and interested in neuro. My master's degree was in neuroscience. So I was practicing what we call PNF, proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation. And I was studying that and practicing that and fascinated by the connection in this facilitation technique of quick stretch and circular movement. That fascinated me because in exercise, we just learned cardinal planes. And I thought it didn't make much sense, but that was way back in 1969, 71. And then I got sidetracked from clinical work by taking a university position to develop clinical education at the University of Alabama in Birmingham. So I went from Boston to Birmingham and was there for several years. Then I was still interested in this connection. I'm an identical twin. So my sister and I have ESP. We think the same thoughts over long distances. Mm-hmm. And so I went back to school to study. I was a science major, but I was interested in rapport, in therapeutic presence, in how who we are as clinicians makes a difference, not just what we do. And I did a dissertation on empathy as one way to look at rapport building with patients. But I was interested in I thought if we could just have a camera to record the energetic connection with empathy, that would be fascinating. So I was still working toward eventually discovering fascia and discovering subtle energy and a fascial flow of energy. But the real change came when I was practicing. I was back in Boston for a little bit for school, and then I came to Miami to teach and practice. And I stumbled upon John Barnes, the manual therapist who teaches what we call sustained release, myofascial release, in 1989. I'd been practicing for 20 years, but this made a huge difference in these questions that I had about interpersonal connection and about touch and about what's happening under our hands, not just with the neurophysiology and the neuroanatomy, but with what's happening with touch. So I began studying Barnes courses very seriously in I put it on hold because I knew that my whole life was going to change as a clinician, finding this material. I didn't know how it was going to change, but I knew I would have to get into the world of that which we cannot prove. And if any of your participants or students are physical therapists, you know there is a very high premium on evidence. Mm-hmm. And on being able to prove what you're doing is what's making a difference. And I was frightened, really, afraid of being ostracized from the profession if I went forward in this complementary therapies or alternative medicine track. But I was too excited about what was happening with my patients. And so I just kept on reading and kept on thinking and kept on writing and took a leave of absence actually and wrote a book. It was called Complementary Therapies and Rehabilitation. It's now in its 4th edition. It's now Integrative Therapies and Rehabilitation. But I was looking at the science because I wanted to know what was it about what we were doing that we could say is based in science.
Yeah.
Well, the science that it's based in is not randomized trials. It's not based on collecting data and looking at means and standard deviations from the mean. It's based on what's happening at the cellular level, the science of cellular physiology. And so I began to write about that. And at the same time, in the 90s, Donald Ingber
Mhm.
was writing about mechanotransduction, about what happens with subtle energy when we touch, and what happens with the energy that comes out of our hands and the energy that's stimulated in the tissue, because this is a liquid crystal matrix, what happens to the cells. And I began to realize this really was what I was feeling under my hands. And then in 2007, Jean-Claude Guimbarteau came out with his Strolling Under the Skin
Yeah.
video of live fascia. Put those two together, the biotensegrity and the live fascia and the structure of that cellular web, that liquid crystal matrix of tissue. And then I just put those together and began to really recognize, here's the link, and began studying more about that, writing more about that, teaching more about that. And that's where we are today.
That's very nice. In fact, I did John Barnes training in 1995.
Really?
Yes, in Fort Lauderdale. And I remember I was very impressed with all, all the teachings in, the release part. And actually, that part was really very important in my career as a physical therapist. It has changed the way I see things. So it all
Right.
started there. And lots of our students are learning about biotensegrity, and now and then I often get this question:
Mhm.
how is biotensegrity going to impact my practice? Can you
Ah,
tell them?
yes. Well, I can tell them how it's impacted my practice. And that is, um, we tend to think of, first of all, we didn't understand how fascia was so important. We tossed it away
Yeah.
in gross anatomy. We saw it as filler and get it out of the way so we can see the muscles and the nerves and the blood vessels and and then when I realized that fascia was really this web of tissue, that and that there weren't any layers, there was just a living crystallized web, and everything, and Barnes taught this, everything is connected, it's all continuous tissue.
Mhm.
So all the drawings that we saw in the books, where there's the superficial fascial layer and then the deep fascial layer, we had to rethink all that into something like this. This is a 3D model that John Sharkey gave me, and it illustrates kind of how the web is constructed inside of us. You see, there are no real layers. There's just, there are polygons that are close to the surface, and then there are polygons underneath that, and polygons underneath that, and polygons underneath that, so that we have polygons out to the surface where the skin is embedded in the fascia, all the way down to the deep interstitium that surrounds the organs. And now what we know is the organs are really fascial in
Yeah.
nature. The cells of the heart, the cells of the lungs, the cells of muscles only can work because they're embedded within the fascia that allows them to work. And I just saw this marvelous talk with Robert Schleip and Jan, can't remember his last name, said when we have pain with sports injuries, it's not the muscle that's giving us pain, it's the fascia, it's the myofascia that's giving the pain, not the pure muscle. So you can't separate them, all right? All right, that's to start. Well, when I saw a lecture once, and I won't say who it's from, about how do we reach fascia close to the bone. And the response of the anatomist was, well, you have to press very, very hard. You have to push very, very hard to get way deep. And I actually got up and left the talk because something inside of me was saying, no, 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 that's not the way it works at all. And here was this expert saying this. So I found a colleague outside. This was at a conference in another country. And I found a colleague outside and I said, did you feel what was wrong with that? He said, oh yeah. He said, it's all one. You don't dig deeper. You go down to where the body presses back. You match and you wait there. And then as you're waiting there, your hands will sink in. This is what Barnes teaches. Your hands will sink in a little bit in 60 to 90 seconds. Barnes teaches that that's when our energy, the waveform of our inner energy and the waveform of the fascial web that we're connecting with come into synchrony and then are coming together. And that's when the real release starts. But it doesn't start because we're digging deep. It starts because we're connected throughout the whole web. And then another thing that biotensegrity taught me was that my infrared energy and the energy coming out of my hands is going right down to the nucleus of all of those cells. Right. And that the information that I'm feeling in my heart or thinking in my head, God forbid, because if I'm just thinking, I'm not connected. But if I'm down here and in my heart intending to bring about good, feeling compassion, the waveform of that energy is connecting to the interoceptive system in the patient, in the client. And that interoceptive system, the interoceptive nerves, all the way out at the skin, all the way down to the bone, at the skin, mediated by the fascia of the glial cells, just under the skin. They're not nerve cells, but the fascia under the skin is picking that up and sending it to the interoceptive free nerve endings. They're not really free nerve endings. They're connected to the glia. Mm-hmm. And the mesh, and then the message is going up from my heart to the interoceptive cortex, goes up the spinal thalamic tract. Instead of going to the sensory motor cortex, shifts over to the insula and goes to the anterior insula and the posterior insula, and is perceived as a feeling, mm-hmm. as a feeling of safety, as a feeling of help, and goes down, then it gets shifted down to the amygdala and the hippocampus, and the limbic system picks up that I'm safe here, all is well. And then if I ask the patient, breathe with me now, feel where my hands are, breathe into my hands. Their breath is pushing out against the cells and allowing that fascial web to open up. My hands are helping to melt that polysaccharide ground substance where the restrictions are so that the cells can then talk to one another. And the whole of the person benefits, no matter where my hands are, the whole of the person benefits. And at the end of the treatment, very often what I always find the restrictions and release the restrictions. But at the end of the treatment, I have them turn over if they're not already on their back. And I do cranial work, and I end with a sphenoid release where I put my hands here and I'm just feeling that wonderful rocking motion of the sphenoid, because everything that I've worked with, that we've worked with together, has been influenced by my energy. I didn't do anything to it. The energy went into the fascia, and then the fascia picks up that energy and reorganizes itself. I'm not doing it. The energy of the system is doing it. And then, but what I'm thinking about as they're lying on the table and I'm doing a sphenoid release, I feel gratitude. Oh, thank you for allowing me to do this work and to be paid for it. And I'm just so grateful. And patients pick up on this right away and they say, oh, I feel so much better. And they get up, I feel so much lighter. I take them to the mirror and they can see where their restrictions are no longer distorting their posture anymore. But it's all because of the energetic flow it's already there in biotensegrity. Remember, this is these polygons are really just pictures of the energy flow of the push-pull. There's no polygon inside of us, although the web forming of the fascia in the tubules looks like that. With biotensegrity, what those polygons are doing is some of it is tension, some of it is compression. Tension, compression. From the time that the sperm and the egg, with tension and compression, get together for the embryo, that force, that life force that I believe comes from the great beyond, the Akashic field. This is Ervin Laszlo's research. Some people would call that God, the creative energy comes into us and is a part of our dynamic system that never stops until we draw the last breath. And our energy as therapists is simply adding to that energy, which is in our patients, and allowing the fascia to reconfigure itself. Jantri Watha says, allow the fascia to come back home, to find its way home. And then we're centered and balanced, and the body can heal itself. So that's how it's changed my practice. And that's how I practice.
So beautiful. You know, there are so many important things that you have mentioned. First, like the therapist has to be has to have a good intention in his heart in order to touch another person. And then the other one
Can't be figuring things out all the time. You figure things out in the beginning. You use your diagnostic left brain skills, but when you start treating, you got to go into what John calls channel 3. Remember, get out of your head, get into your body and feel deeply with your mechanoreceptors and your proprioceptors, and felt with the compassion of the heart. Right.
And trust what you're feeling. And then the other one has to give permission for you to go inside their system. And then, you know, you said something really important, that is bring safety to this person, because without safety, nothing can happen, you know.
Right.
So we have to bring a safe environment, a safe feeling in order for the other one to respond. So that's very beautiful. And when Jan said fascia going back home, this makes so much sense, because that's what it is, huh?
It is, yeah.
Along the life, we kind of get out of our home, but we want to go back home, right?
Yeah, and where everything's in balance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
yeah, this is tamping down through our energy and our touch, lowering the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight, lifting up the parasympathetic, the ventral vagal, so that the patient trusts and can let go. And then when memories come up, of course, then they feel safe to revisit a little bit, maybe tiptoe toward those memories and that traumas that's stuck in the tissue, and allow the emotions to come up. But we can do this not just through the character of our touch and our intention. We do it by making it a lovely environment for our patients, whether it's a movement environment, whether it's a Pilates environment, whether it's a manual therapy environment. Is the environment welcoming? Is it are the colors soothing? Is there an ability to, do you have a voice that is inviting and welcoming? Instead of being, okay, now let's get going here. We're gonna work really hard. No. The fascial system does this. That's sympathetic. That's go get them. That's military. No. What you want is soothing and safety and music if you can, or just allowing a kind of a rhythmical, if you're doing a class, allow your suggestions to the class to become rhythmical. Okay, let's bring your knees up to your chest and then lower, and bring your knees up to your chest and then lower. So the way you're almost sing-songing to the people on the equipment if you're doing Pilates. It really counts how we are, and that goes back to my dissertation research on empathy, how we are with our patients, not just what we do.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm so proud of our profession, because we get to do all of this and make it possible, and help people in this beautiful way. So I really can't wait for your class on May 1st. We are looking forward.
Right?
You
Good.
mentioned your book. Can we buy your book
Yeah.
at Amazon?
Hold on just a second.
Okay.
Let me get it for you. You can get it from Slack Books,
Oh, okay.
slackbooks.com. Integrative Therapies and Rehabilitation, Slack Books. This is the 4th edition. That's the one I want you to get because it's got the latest science in it. Every time another edition came out, I wrote another science chapter as the science kept getting more and more and more. There's a great chapter on science, on fascia and biotensegrity. Now I'm working on the 5th edition, and the 5th edition will be fascia and biotensegrity. But John Barnes has an excellent chapter on myofascial release. Brent Anderson has an excellent chapter on Pilates. And there's an excellent chapter on yoga, Matt Taylor, for the movement folks. There's a chapter on Feldenkrais. There are a lot of chapters on here of how integrative therapies are making a difference in rehabilitation. But what we're talking about here is the 5 science chapters in the beginning of the book that establishes this work, these outcomes in science. So that if somebody comes up to you and says, oh, I don't believe in any of that stuff, it's just woo-woo, it's not science-based. No, it's science-based. You're just not reading the right science.
Wonderful. So thank you so much for your time.
My great pleasure. It's going to be fun.
Oh yeah, we're looking forward for May 1st,
Yes.
and hope to see you
And
soon.
if they have questions, maybe they could get you questions in advance.
Yes, sounds good. Yeah, I'll do that.
Based on what I've said. Yeah, because I could give you some references you can look up. If you just Google Donald Ingber, Ingber, and another person would be Pollack, Pollack, and heavy water, the 4th phase of water. And all of that, and James Oshman, if you're interested in the science, James Oshman, Energy Medicine, those books will give you the solid science behind what we're talking about.
Sounds good.
Okay.
They already had Donald Ingber, and also Pollack.
Okay,
So
great.
they're doing good. All right.
Okay,
you.
thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll see you
Have a
on
good day.
May 1st. Bye.
Great. Okay. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.